I'd like to call to order the December meeting of the...
Phone numbers and emails.
I'd like to call to order the December meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board. Can we have a report on the posting of agenda, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The agenda was posted last week in accordance with state and local procedures.
Okay, thank you. At this time, do we have any public comments?
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is
Oh, sorry.
My name is Robert Hazuka. I'm not
Do
on
that
the
afterwards.
agenda. I live in Tockwitz River Estates, and an issue has come up that's was of concern to me individually originally, but I think it's become a community issue right now. And to coin a term, the Orange Countyization, I think, of our neighborhood. I'm not sure from the perspective of this commission what significance this community has, this neighborhood has. It's Tockwitz River Estates. I've learned that it was one of the first tract developments in Palm Springs. And what has occurred is that I think that neighborhood was a working class neighborhood that is going through the gentrification process. It's sat relatively untouched since it was built in terms of the vernacular of the neighborhood. And suddenly we've got an Orange County type monster house that's being dropped into the neighborhood. The neighborhood consists of basically 1,500 square foot houses, and this is a 4,000 square foot house with a huge profile that is totally out of character with the neighborhood. I'm dusting off my 1960s activism hat to try and get involved from a community perspective to see what we could do to possibly either curb or submit that for review, that kind of development within our neighborhood but the community at large. So I just wanted to introduce myself and see who some of the folks are on this commission and see if I can work with the community to accomplish this. Thank you.
I recommended that he's my neighbor, Robert's my neighbor, and I thought he might come to us to voice his concern because this is potentially a future neighborhood that may have some valuable resource for us. So this house that they're building, unbeknownst to the rest of the neighbors, is definitely a monster house. I mean, mine was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath cottage, essentially, and this is a 6-bathroom with a kind of a sub-basement with a master bedroom on top of that. It's really pushing the 2-story envelope in a very low-scale, flat-roofed 1-story neighborhood. So it's that fighting for the views deal kind of thing that the beach that we had at the Beach Wars in Orange County, very much like where I'm from, and this mansionization thing, we got to be careful about that because it can hurt the neighborhood. So I thought perhaps if Robert brought this to our attention, perhaps we could help direct him, give him some guidance. Thank you.
Is it appropriate that we can have a discussion about this, Doug? Or?
Well, I can give the board a brief update, but you can't discuss it. The only thing you could do is ask that we put it on the agenda. This is, at this point, this is not a designated historic neighborhood. There are no designated historic sites.
Can you tell us specifically where it is? Because
Tockwitz River Estates is basically San Lorenzo area, west of Sunrise Way, south of Mesquite, and then north of Mesquite, and then south of the Tockwitz Wash. Small residential neighborhood that's an old subdivision. It has narrow streets, parkways, and I think the description of the existing development is accurately characterized. It's was all built under the old codes of 15-foot height limits, and was probably a very modest neighborhood when it was first developed, and it's undergoing significant renovation changes. The residence that's being discussed under public comments, is one that the longtime property owner has had property in the neighborhood. They had a change in family circumstances. They chose to build a structure with a basement and meet the code criteria for a basement, which basically means it needs to be partially underground, level above. It's my understanding that the house complies with all codes and ordinances. And in single-family residential zones, On flat land, the city does not have an architectural approval process. The city basically allows people to build structures that are in compliance with zone and compliance with building code requirements without any further review. In fact, the planning department typically, for most single-family homes, has no involvement unless there's a zoning problem. Then we're consulted on the zoning issue. Once that determination is made, all one has to apply for is a building permit. I've looked at the letter, and we are going to give you a written response.
Thank you, Doug.
We're pulling the information together. But, you know, at this point, it's really a planning commission, city council issue. The change in height criteria, you know, has set up a situation where you can have larger structures next to lower structures. That was pointed out when we changed the code. There are some code provisions that talk about building envelopes and things of that nature. But essentially, you could have a building set in a neighborhood that's 18 feet in height with the neighboring structures at 15 feet 6 inches or thereabouts, and with the new requirements that are sometimes imposed for grading and lot drainage, you know, you can have 2 to 3 feet in height difference for maximum height structure relative to existing neighbors. So to address the concern, so that there would be neighborhood involvement and review and things of that nature, we would have to go back in and rework the zoning ordinance, which establishes the fundamental zoning controls, create a different type of process for review. You know, and I'd have to tell you that if we had to review every renovation project from a planning perspective and a neighborhood perspective, would have a pretty significant impact on the turnaround time for standard residential permits as well as resource level. You know, we do hundreds and hundreds of residential permits a year that really, it's a zoning compliance review, not a neighborhood or design review. So that's a quick overview. What we'll do is put together the ordinances and codes and indicate you know, what would have to occur and how to engage the Planning Commission and City Council in a dialogue as to changing the codes and ordinances. I can tell you that the majority of our customers would not be very pleased if they found out on flatland single-family homes that they had to go through a design review process. We could, in theory, change the zoning regulations so that they're a little bit different for existing neighborhoods versus you know, new neighborhoods. And that's something that I've talked to the Planning Commission about several times, and you know, so far they're comfortable with the 18-foot height limit as opposed to going back to, you know, what essentially worked out to be about a 15-foot 6 height limit in our older neighborhoods. But that's a quick overview, and that's what we're going to put together in writing, you know, so that the council, Planning Commission, and the people that are concerned, and there's evidently a growing list, can basically see, you know, what the existing codes and policies are, and then what the process is to change them.
If I may, very quickly, Doug, so that I know you're expending resources to accomplish this and to address the issue which I have written to you about. And I just want to make a point that it's not, my intent is not to create a stumbling block for people to develop their properties. And to clarify with this table, this is not just a remodel in the neighborhood. That house was completely demolished. This is brand new construction. And I think that's the issue I'm trying to address. The size, the 4,000 square foot footprint, square footage of this house, which is like more than twice what is in the neighborhood, is not even an issue. And the height doesn't necessarily have to be an issue, too, if it was considered where that height is placed. It was placed probably in the most inappropriate position on this lot, which was blocking a totally unobstructed view corridor that has existed since that neighborhood went up.
And those types of issues can be dealt with relative to zoning codes, but it would be a different type of evaluation and a qualitative one to try to define views and view corridors. But that's something, clearly there are ways to deal with this type of issue. It's a matter of whether or not the community, and its decision makers want to try to come in and fix an issue. But we're looking at it, and we knew at staff level that this would likely generate some interest when the permit was issued, but we don't have the discretion to say you can't get a permit if you comply with the law. I mean, that's a ministerial action, and under today's codes and ordinances, staff is not allowed to interfere with the issuance of a permit that complied with law, and it's my understanding that this one did. So we're looking into it. We'll get back, and if the board would like an update, we can keep you posted.
Board Member Hayden, would you like to have it on next month's agenda to discuss?
Well, yes, I think the real importance to me here is that that nobody knew this was going to happen. I mean, like Robert said, it wasn't a remodel. I think we're seeing a change in neighbors, not just the neighborhood, but the quality of the neighbors that don't really take into account the impact that they have on others, where that used to be a given. I think now people are looking at it from a speculative standpoint. I'm sure that's the case here, knowing the party involved. And this is like a big surprise for this man to suddenly lose not only all his view, but all his privacy in his backyard. I mean, they have like windows over his yard and everything, so it's very obtrusive, and I would hate it. And to not have any notification, I think, is a mistake on a new construction. That's something so different in scale than the rest of the neighborhood. I think it's too bad that these people wouldn't at least get notified so that they would be able to inspect this prior to something like this being built, because now, we're pregnant. So basically. So yeah, I'd like to see this come back, because this could happen in any neighborhood. And it's just an issue we have to look at, because, and maybe not in our lifetimes, this is going to be some historic properties in here. Thank you.
Just a quick clarification. Isn't there a notification process of neighbors within so many feet or something, Doug? And then beyond that, this is really an issue for the Planning Commission, not really for us at this point.
If a permit complies with all codes and ordinances, and it's on, flat land, single-family residential, there is no permit notification required. If it's an architectural approval item and it's in hillside, we do send a courtesy notice on hillside properties, but only hillside properties, and those are Planning Commission approval houses, so we notify people that the plans are in and let people know what the process is so they can track it. The only other single-family homes that we look at architecturally, where we do exercise some discretion in qualitative design, are single-family homes located on major thoroughfares. The mansionization, or McMansions as they're sometimes referred to in planning articles, is a common issue all over the place. And, we've run into this, in Las Palmas, where people are uncomfortable with, the size of structures and houses, but they comply with by right of zone. And, historically, a lot of our neighborhoods did develop with zero qualitative review on behalf of the government. I mean, our best neighborhoods pretty much were developed without any architectural control. So it's a neighborhood dynamic that clearly is part of our dialogue with the General Plan Steering Committee, because they're going to set the policy for the community, as well as the day-to-day administration through the Planning Commission relative to zoning ordinance and ultimately adoption of a general plan. So we'll keep everybody posted, and like I said, we'll prepare a written response. We'll make sure that the board gets a copy of that.
Thank you, Robert, for bringing your concerns to the board. The only other comment I would make is I don't know the makeup of the neighborhood. I don't know the houses. I don't know the significance architecturally of the houses or historically. But one way to handle a situation like this would be to have a neighborhood designation as a historic neighborhood. I know that's a long way off, but that's something, if it's on the agenda next time, perhaps we can talk about. Okay. Thank you
And
very
that was
much.
my purpose, to give me some guidance, because the process is all new to me, but
Yeah.
I am going to pursue the process.
Okay.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much. Thank you.
Are there other public comments? Well, let's get back to the roll call, which I overlooked. Could we have a roll call, Loretta, please?
Jim Iserman,
Present?
William Scott,
Present.
James Hayton, Ron Chesak, absent Lee Bledsoe,
Present.
Chev Rush, Chairman Williams.
Present. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Did everyone get a copy of the minutes, and are there any changes or corrections? All right, there was, on page 3 of the minutes, it said, Chairman, about a third of the third paragraph, Chairman Williams asked for any other comments, and if the board wanted to hear back at the December meeting about the color issue of the outside building, not the November. Any other changes or corrections? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move that the minutes be approved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes pass. Okay. Under Chairman's report, I wanted to talk about a couple of meetings that our subcommittee had with the Realtor representing the owner and some potential buyers of the property located at the corner of Tockwitz Canyon and Palm Canyon, which is commonly known as the Starbucks building. We had 2 meetings. Our first meeting was here at City Hall with Doug and several people involved, potential buyer, architect for a buyer who had just pulled out, and so forth. And we decided to continue that by having actually a tour of the building. Is everyone familiar with the building that I'm talking about? So we visited the building, which everyone here I'm sure knows has the historic site, which is the Oasis Hotel Tower. And we toured the building with Steve Lyle of Lyle Commercial Realtors. We toured the tower and the infamous and now, I guess, famous Loretta Young Room on the 3rd floor. We toured the Lloyd Wright Hotel building, which is on the southwest corner of the property. The 1952 Stuart Williams building, which is the Starbucks coffee building, and that is on the northeast corner of the property, and that was formerly Mr. Williams' office, Stuart Williams' office. We also toured the hotel building, which is on the northwest corner of the property. That's the one that's at Bellardo and Tockwitz Canyon, and that one, no one seems to know who the architect is for that building. And we toured the courtyard behind and the exterior in front of the Robon's Jewelry Building, which is on Palm Canyon. And we found out some interesting things. First of all, the Robon's building, the tower, and the first floor of the Lloyd Wright Hotel building were built in 1923 to 1925. It says in the designation, actually, that the Robon's building was actually the entrance to the hotel when it was first built. Everyone seems to agree, and it's even mentioned in the original designation, that the second story of the Lloyd Wright Hotel building was added at a later date. The Robon's building has been extensively altered, and the facade has been really altered over the years. However, as I said, it was the original entrance to the hotel, and notes in the original designation of the tower suggested that it perhaps should be designated at a later date, even though it never was. That was noted, as you know, Doug. Mr. Lyle had some interesting ideas on how to increase the visibility of the tower, which is the currently designated part of the property. The entire block, even though it's separate parcels, is for sale as one piece of property. I think the price is about $6 million or so. The suggestions that he had would require losing the front section of the tower hotel rooms. The tower, as you may or may not know, it's sort of in a tower in the middle, rooms in the front, and rooms in the back. And the whole thing is in pretty sad shape, but the rooms in the front are in really bad shape. However, it is part of the designated property. So, the other thing that we would, based on his suggestions, is we would lose most of the front of the Robon's jewelry store facade, which is part of the original building. His ideas would also include tearing down the 2 hotel buildings in the back to provide parking. The Lloyd Wright building is from the original structure, but it is in very bad condition. It has 18-inch thick cement block walls, which are almost impossible to work with, and it has been altered by the addition of a 2nd story. And then the 2nd hotel building, which is on the northwest corner, no one seems to know anything about that. But he would suggest leaving intact the 1952 Stuart Williams office building. There were some plans at one time to alter that severely. Those seem to have gone by the wayside. However, at this point, I suggest we just take a wait-and-see approach. There doesn't seem to be a firm buyer in place at the moment, and there's no concrete plans in place. There were some, but that buyer backed out. And we may have to be flexible to accomplish what I think are 2 very good goals, and one is to save the tower, and the second is to get it restored and have it more visible to the public view. And I was encouraged that Mr. Lyle seemed dedicated to saving the tower and hopefully opening it up for public view. I was a little discouraged that we might lose some of the buildings, but that may be the reality of making it a viable project. So those are my comments. Do you have anything to add to that, Bill? Or?
Just one clarification. You said that the existing Frank Lloyd Wright Hotel building is concrete block. It's cast-in-place concrete.
I'm
not
sorry, you're
concrete
right.
block.
Poured-in-place concrete, absolutely.
But otherwise, I share all your feelings about it.
Okay. So I thought it was a very good meeting, and as I said, I'm encouraged that the owners, through their agent, are interested in preserving what is already a designated site, and also the Stuart Williams building. So that's good news.
I have a question.
Sure.
I don't understand how this is going to make the tower more visible. Is something going to replace the demolished portions you're talking about?
The plan that he suggested to us would have the front of the jewelry building, which now runs north and south. The north end would be brought back, so there would be less frontage on Palm Canyon. And then it would sort of cascade back, opening up more of a courtyard, and the tower would be in the back of the courtyard. Whereas now the tower is pretty much obscured by the pet shop, what's it called? Aristocats. It was actually constructed outside of what is the original building and in front of the tower. So if you walk by there, you don't see the tower at all, unless you sort of look around the corner like that. So, I mean, it's
Well, I guess I'm confused how losing square footage is going to make this property more viable.
No.
well, go ahead.
If you want I'll show you the plan here of the existing project, and right now it's an L shape, and this is the part that is designated, and he would infill all this with commercial and open up a plaza there.
So the tower wouldn't be viewable from the south.
From here, well, it would stay low, the retail would stay low, but right now there's an existing courtyard here, and then the new La Plaza, Mercado Plaza is right adjacent to it here. But that was only one idea, and there are other people looking at it whose ideas are to try to maybe keep much more of what's there and do a little more infill. So I think it's just very preliminary. No requests are being made.
If I could quickly comment, in the world of transactional real estate, and that's where this is, the property's up for sale. We get a number of prospective buyers looking at it, and originally the subcommittee was intended to meet with a prospective buyer who at the last minute chose not to go forward. That's why we had an interesting meeting with a different prospective buyer and the architect from the prior prospective buyer, because nobody told him the meeting was canceled. I think the key issue that that maybe the board just needs to recognize that the subcommittee looked at was in the process of trying to maintain the economic viability of both buildings, that there may need to be some flexibility, and part of that flexibility might be to open up a view corridor to the tower, because right now it is hard to see unless you know how to position yourself. And then take a look at the fact that if the property is, economically viable for another 15 to 20 to 30 years, that the current state of deferred maintenance, which is affecting the integrity of the tower, can be corrected, and that could be part of the permit process. So it's a trade-off, because the little building that's in front of the tower, even though it's a designated Class 1 site, I'm not sure really has a lot of richness and character other than it blocks the tower to a large degree. But the whole idea of this subcommittee was to allow the owners, reps, whether they're buyers or agents, to have a better feel for the historic resources as they promote the property. It is, in the real estate vernacular, it is #1 corner in Palm Springs. And to have it in a state of flux is worrisome, because the maintenance doesn't occur, when a property's up for sale. And hopefully we'll get a transaction. The other key issue is the rear of the property, to probably make it economically viable, probably needs to become parking, because that's the #1 problem with bringing in good tenants, is where are the tenants gonna park, and where are the customers gonna park. And historically, that's been a real challenge. Logistically, that parking lot is probably the most intensively managed of any, because there's so few spaces for so much activity.
One quick question. If part of this property is so poorly maintained, and it's part of the, most desirable block in Palm Springs, is there nothing the city can do to require maintenance of this property?
Well, we can certainly work with the property owner on maintenance, and I think the issue is, it's going to take the interest of somebody that really wants to create the tower as a showcase, to keep it up to current criteria, to just keep it structurally sound and just barely above a nuisance. That's what the city's normal police powers can do. Judges are not going to make us make a property go beyond acceptable, in public nuisance level, and that's the awkward part. And the current owner is I think in all good faith trying to sell the property, has done a good job for a long time. They've been good stewards. It's just my concern is into the future, that may not occur if the property sits on the sales block for a long time.
I mean, my concern would be the example of what happened to the Biltmore.
Mhm.
I mean, it deteriorated to a point where it was no longer viable to be restored, and I would hate to see that happen to the only Lloyd Wright
Mhm.
structure in the Coachella Valley.
Right. We would too.
Well, the ideal solution, I think, would be to try and save the Lloyd Wright building. I don't know if that's economically viable. There are some potential buyers who are interested in that, so at this point, I think we just need to be aware of the potential changes. Interestingly, there's a letter as part of the designation dated January 14th, 1985, and part of the letter, it says, "The city has been aware that it has long been my intention to develop my property to its highest and best use." And I don't think any changes have taken place, really, since 1985. But he does indicate that he would like to keep the tower. Let me just read it. "I want to express my great concern about 3 matters which are related to the Oasis Hotel Tower. First, is it important that only those structures adjoining the tower, as indicated in your site plan, which are necessary for its physical support, be designated historic sites. Second, I should not be restricted from removing or improving those adjoining structures as long as the tower itself is preserved. And third, it may be necessary to move the tower to some other location within the property." Well, we certainly hope that won't happen. But there's been a lot of talk about developing that corner for a long time, so we'll see. That's the end of the chairman's report. So today we have no architectural approvals on the agenda. So let's move to the first agenda item, which is the Tramway Visitors Gas Station update. And we have Linda Fort with us today from Palm Springs Tourism. I'd like to invite Linda to join us at the table, Doug, if that's okay. And we have also, both of you come to.
Kurt Watts, but I'm just here kind of sitting in as
Okay.
staff.
And I wanted this on the agenda because Linda contacted me just a few days ago about some concerns that she and her staff have about the visitor center and some of the things that have happened and some of the things that have not happened. So I was wondering if, Doug, if you can just give us a quick update from your perspective of where we stand on that project.
Well, Linda can certainly give you a hands-on update of where the property is. The board discussed the color of the restroom building at your last meeting. We discussed the wall. We gave the board an update. I think that everybody now has a better understanding of situations. There is the issue of placement of the plaque on the property. Ching has gone up there and looked at the placement of the plaque location and has some ideas, and I'll let Jing go over that in a moment. There is a grand opening date, I think tentatively placed right now, of January 6th. I believe it's 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. We're not directly involved in the grand opening, so Linda can probably give you better details. And then there is a message board, descriptive message board that the gallery owners had put together, a little bit of the history and evolution of the building. It's a steel plaque, fairly large. I don't know, 5 by 5 would be my guess. There was some discussion very early about whether or not that should stay on site or not. I can tell you that when they imprinted the lettering on it, some of it wasn't printed as well, so some of it's becoming very difficult to read, and over time I think will become more difficult to read. I'm not sure if it can be restored or fixed. It's really not part of the historic structure. It was something that was added, and I'm not sure it was ever officially reviewed by the board. I don't have a recollection of specifically looking at it. And I don't think the notes show that it was looked at. But, those are the issues at this point, and Linda might be able to give you an update on, how the building's working and what her concerns might be.
Well, before we go to that, let me add a couple of comments in, and I've already spoken with Linda. I had a meeting with Liz, who is the manager of the Visitor Center, and she identified a number of issues which I'd like for us to discuss at this meeting and see if we can come to some conclusion on. One was lighting. There seems to be insufficient lighting inside and particularly outside because it gets dark at night and the center is still open during some of the dark times. Big issue, probably the biggest one, was signage. There's currently no sign to direct people to the visitor center, and therefore the traffic at the visitor center is actually down from what it was in the old center. And I'm not sure how to deal with that because apparently there's also no budget for a sign. The suggestion was made that maybe we just somehow in appropriate lettering put Palm Springs Visitor Center on the wall that's around, there's a curved wall as you come to it, but I'm not sure. Exterior landscaping, when the plans were submitted to us, it was, I thought, a plan for landscaping. There was talk about an area that would be sort of an outdoor theater, sloping ground area right in front and so forth. Again, the word I'm hearing on that is no budget, so I don't know where that stands. Interior colors. The staff feels like the center is dark, doesn't have bright colors, is not welcoming to the tourists. I think that there's been some movement on that in terms of the tribe has someone who might have some ideas for you, but I do think that we need to be very careful about what we do there and make sure that people who are familiar with historical buildings are involved in that process. Outside, there's one bench and one trash can. And Liz said that she was meeting with the city about trying to find some appropriate structures that people can just actually sit on, because you need some benches outside. You want to encourage people to be outside and see the building. That may be part of the landscaping issue. The historical plaque, which I definitely should be installed, but I think we need to be sure that we do it in such a way that we don't damage the exterior of the building. I think it needs to be visible, but I don't exactly know how you put it on that block wall without doing some damage. But that's an issue we can deal with also. Flagpoles. Apparently the Rotary Club has sponsored $2,000 worth of flagpoles, which I think is a good thing, but we just need to make sure that they're placed in such a way that they don't take away from the building and don't conflict with the future landscaping plans. And then the gate, the old gate, the Montana St. Martin's Gate, which I think has a lot of potential to be an interesting piece located probably somewhere on the grounds. That's my own thought.
Is that where this text is?
Mm-hmm.
On the-
That's the gate that used to swing. It has a pivot sort of not at the end, but not quite in the center. And there's actually, it talks about the architect and everything up to the art gallery, and there's a section about this big at the bottom of the gate, which could be inscribed with what's happened since the gallery. It's now become the visitor center on a certain date in 2003, and it could be a nice piece, a historical piece for the tourists to see. And so that's sort of a laundry list. So, Linda, why don't you speak to some of those issues?
Well, also, if we could invite Kurt Watts from the city up, because he's
Sure,
had such an
absolutely.
integral part of this that I don't want to, number one, misspeak. And number two, oh, he's already here. Sneaky little
You
thing.
want a big chair for Kurt here? Yes, okay, okay.
First of all, the city is very well aware that we don't have money for signage, that there's not money for landscaping. So, that's just something we're having to deal with. But as you said, we are down 200 to 300 visitors a day. We track it on an historical basis, what we did this time last year. As you come around that little curve, your eye is drawn to the wall, which is about 4 feet high. There is a banner that's up on the poles underneath the flying wedge roof, but your eye doesn't go up there until it's passed. So, obviously it's distressful to us to be anticipating hundreds of visitors coming to the building and not getting them. The city did move one of their directional signage highway signs just right before that. But if that light is green, people are just going to zip right through there. For the speed limit there is 45 miles an hour, and what we've recommended is maybe they could do the flashing red stop, so people have to stop there and kind of look over to their yeah. Yeah, do the little speed spikes, but it is a concern of us because number one, our purpose is to attract visitors. Number two, we're in one of the most historically recognized buildings in the entire valley, and it's always been one of those buildings that people had a lot of curiosity about. Now it's finally open. And people aren't, maybe if they're repeat visitors, they're so used to it having been closed that they don't pay any attention to it, or it's just an interesting piece of architecture as they go zipping by. Lighting is being addressed by the city. The parking lots, there's areas of parking lots that are fairly dark. Kurt can certainly address the lighting issues because I know those are being worked on.
Yes, I can go through a little bit of detail on the various items that you listed, and at least give everyone the same update in terms of where we stand, and Doug and planning as well if they have other items to it. In terms of the lighting and the signage as the top two issues, I think that's recognized by everyone, but it is a question of the budget funds. During the approval process, the City Council basically put a cap on the total budget for the project, and as a result of that, the architects did what they could within design and budget, and the council approved a design that basically took existing lighting that was at the gallery for the parking lot areas, relocated those to give as best coverage as they could on the parking lot area and the public path of travel from the parking to the building. And that was the extent of the lighting that was allowed for within the budget and the design.
Can I ask one lighting question before you move on? I visited the center this weekend, and before the renovation happened, there was a lot of uplights along the front of the building, and they all seem to be gone now.
That's correct. Basically, the design contract called for a relamping of all of the existing lighting. What was discovered at some time basically between the gallery moving out and our start of construction was vandalism had basically taken all of the fixtures as well as the low voltage wiring that ran to those fixtures. So there was no money for replacement of those fixtures. So there was an assumption up front that that lighting would be restored, but in reality, due to the vandalism, there was nothing there to restore. So to put that back in place will be a budget outlay of some significance.
And I think they, you know, to go back into the original locations, because the uplighting was actually doweled, the light areas were doweled into the concrete. You know, it's really the substructure that's the challenge,
Right.
because you've got to rewire. There is an effort underway, unless there's been a change, because when we did our final inspection, that was one of the things we talked to them about, to put some uplights underneath the canopy to increase some of the lighting, you know, and basically bounce the light off the canopies, but not in the existing locations, so that it could just be an open trench as opposed to working underneath concrete. Because I'm not sure, you know, it would be in the best interest of the building to go back in and get back underneath the concrete.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if I could just make a general comment, I mean, the council did something that was very strong as far as their direction on this project. They basically fixed a budget, made the team fit the budget. Traditionally, when the city builds things, it has tended in the past to have open-ended budgets and just keep fixing things until everybody was happy. In this particular case, the parking lot lighting that we would normally assume would go in with the project was not installed and did a temporary fix. The landscape issue, just to touch on that, the landscape plan that was with the initial plans was reviewed through the process. You saw it, design review saw it, planning commission saw it, nobody liked it. And when council looked at it, they said, if that's all we're going to do, we'd rather not spend the money on landscape, because we think we'll just be criticized that it's poorly done, and we probably need to revisit it at a later time. At one point, there was an effort to partner with another entity in the community for a landscape program that had very promising opportunities that have since not materialized. So I think the council's going to ultimately have to come back and deal with the landscape improvement one way or the other, and hopefully we can develop that previous partnership and work on that so that the landscaping can come back in. But, you know, those are some key issues. You know, I think, you know, Kurt and Linda hit it right on the nose, and that is the council fixed a budget and certain things had to be cut. And as we got into the remodeling part of the project, we found, you know, things that needed to be done, that had to be done. And, you know, there's been some people that have worked on this project that have actually reduced their fees so that there could be more money available for some of the work. I think they've tapped about every resource that I can. It's not very often that city contractors reduce their fees so they could add to the project, but that's occurred in a couple of instances. You know, I'm not sure, Linda, if you have additional concerns. We got up to...
I'd like to just let Kurt continue to talk a little more about if there are any concrete plans in place. It sounds like the lighting issue is being addressed.
Well, I don't want to overstate that. I mean, it's been a subject of discussion for quite some time. And up until about 2 weeks ago, when the staff moved in, you know, the primary issue was getting the facility up and running, because we were under a deadline to be out of the existing facility by the end of November. And so we had to get that, and the logistics of the staff having to work with changing over the reservation systems and so on and so forth. So it was a bit of a situation of, well, we only have X amount of money, no promises for anything additional. We did locate an additional $5,000 to help with lighting, and that is being focused on the path of travel for immediately around the building to hopefully enhance the customers as well as the employees' safety going to and from the building to the parking lot for evening hours, and especially, as you know, with current daylight savings time, evening comes very early. So that has not yet been installed. They have been working through a couple of different design alternatives to try to get the most bang for the buck. But I think what we've experienced since opening is that a as large, if not larger, issue is just visibility of the building and signage to direct people there. They're not even turning into the facility to deal with the path of travel safety lighting. So I think that's a little more of a surprise, because in terms of the signage, we basically tried to replicate what they currently had or what they had at the previous location. We moved the two existing signs on North Palm Canyon, one that's for northbound and one for southbound, those exact same signs just further north, so that people are getting the same amount of freeway signage. I think what the difficulty is that the former building had very large lettering on the side of the building at an angle and with lighting that was very prominent. The best we could do at this point to replicate that was the temporary banner between the support posts, but there's no lighting on that, and as Linda's pointed out, some of the geography is such that you probably don't see that from the same distance that you would have seen it, plus the speed of the traffic there, which is a much harder one to work through.
What do you think of the idea of painting it on the wall, at least temporarily? The wall, as you're coming down Palm Canyon, the wall curves around like this. Palm Springs Official Visitor Center.
Well, I would personally support anything that the process, allowed for, to try to work it through, but I don't think it's really, that's more of a signage planning and or, the various stakeholders.
We're going to have to get down the road on a sign, and obviously the first thing is to get a commitment that there's going to be some funds to build a sign. The second one would be to have somebody design it. It would be very helpful if the board were to tell us if you would be comfortable with a wall-mounted sign, that would allow us to take a look at, that opportunity. If you prefer to have a different type of sign, the question then would be, could it be attached to the building, which I think the building doesn't lend itself, in my opinion, to have a sign attached. Then it becomes a freestanding monument sign, which, if that's the board's direction, we could take a look at that. I think, the traffic issue, sometime probably within the next several months, will get a little bit better. The Century Homes housing project up at Mountain Gate at Gateway Drive is going to put a traffic signal in. So this will no longer be the first stop sign into town. You'll have some traffic control, and people should get out of the accelerator when they hit the first signal into town, like they do today. The parachutes start coming out about 500 yards past Tramway right now with people at the speed that they drive. So hopefully they'll be slowing down. I think eventually, if we redo the entryway signage to the city, we need to carefully look at sight distance because it right now is one of the obstructions that adds to the difficulty of the traveling public of registering that the building is there. We might be able to do some additional off-site signage. The little traditional signage that says Visitor Center is not something that really is a signage statement. It basically says there's something up here, and if you happen to glimpse it, you can start slowing down. I think one of the key issues on this overall, the funding deficiency when you start dealing with landscape, lighting, and signage is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a pretty significant amount of money to do it right. And obviously you can do something less than what traditionally would have been a Palm Springs effort. The council clearly said they're going to have to revisit this. Linda, I don't know, are you on the study session agenda schedule for the Visitor Center? I know council's going to discuss prioritizing things next week.
No.
You might want to talk to the city manager
I'll do
or
that.
Troy about getting on that list, so next week, or Wednesday night, when the council discusses what their agenda is for upcoming study sessions, that this might be an item that they pull forward. Because I think it's one that needs immediate attention relative to, at a minimum, signage.
Well, and that's true, and as Doug is talking, you know, everything is, it's in the plans, but, you know, we're talking about right now, we're talking about today, we're losing the visitors, and, you know, if there was some way where we could get a short-term waiver and put on the wall that it's a Palm Springs Visitor Center, you know, so people will notice it. It doesn't have to be, you can always paint over it, you know, but we're talking about now, not something that's going to come down the road, and we're looking forward to whatever plans are for the additional lighting, whether it's for just the aesthetics or the safety issues, the landscaping and the signage. That's wonderful. We're looking forward to those plans, but we need today.
Yeah. But you might want, you know, the issue of the sign design is one that a proposal needs to be made. And, you know, somebody has to take the initiative to design it and make a proposal, and then it can be reviewed, and that would typically go through, you know, design review and planning commission for.
Well, let me
as well
get
as
just a
the
little
city.
clarification on a couple of other issues, because I've heard this and that. And first of all, exterior landscaping, is there a plan now to put Palm Springs Gold or something on the exterior, or
Yes.
what?
Well, there has been a decomposed granite Palm Springs Gold type surface done around the entire site. I think that occurred either yesterday or day before, but that is within the perimeter wall area, okay, so immediately around the building itself. That was just to cover up previously what was just dirt, okay, that over time had, you know, changed its composition as the different work was going on. So it now basically has a very stark, but at least a clean, fairly attractive surface for what it is, okay? In terms of the only item that was approved by Planning Commission but deleted by the council relative to landscaping was perimeter landscaping around the outside of the perimeter wall. But when the council chose to delete all landscaping in anticipation of another funding source that we hoped we could work with, they felt they shouldn't do it piecemeal and that you should wait. And unfortunately, we got bad news on that alternate source. So there is no money or any approved plans up through the council level in terms of any type of a landscaping product to be done.
And then on the interior issue, can you give us an update what the plans are for that?
We actually have none. As you come into the center, you know, say you're a first-time visitor, and I think increasing the lighting is going to help, but what you get is kind of an overall vision of gray. You have the gray cinder block walls, you have the gray cement floor, we have the black steel furniture for the tribal desk and for our visitors information desk. So, you know, it needs the you know, as I told you, the modern architecture style homes and buildings I've been are very warm. They're very embracing. They're very very colorful, and I don't necessarily mean, you know, the really, really bright colors, but it creates a very warm environment, and that's lacking. And it could just be we need, you know, y'all's guidance or someone's help to come in and say, okay, you can put this on, and it creates that warm, welcoming environment. And that's what we're looking for, is our vision is just when you walk in, it's just kind of like, you know, boy, look at this building, and it just embraces everybody as they come through the door.
The question I was asked earlier in the week to deal with the warmth of the building was, could the interior block be painted? And my comment was that would be, even though the typical historic site designation doesn't affect interiors of buildings, since this is a city-owned structure and the block inside-outside is integral to the design, that probably isn't the best option, that you probably have to do it with furnishings and things of that nature. Linda's description of the building made me feel like that we're in it already.
Great.
You know, a typical government building. The floor, the concrete, you know, I mean, you know, typically in some of the modern architecture, particularly the newer things that people are trying to do to carry on that feel, you know, a polished concrete floor is very typical and very common in residential type designs. But I think the interior furnishings issue, if you can't paint the walls, it's a furnishings issue. And I'm not sure if the board wants to get involved in the furnishing side, or if that's something that Linda needs to work with the city project managers and architects on how to liven that up.
Well,
We had some board comments.
Can
I'm
I-
sorry.
can I jump in here for a second? First of all, I want to pass this around. I just wanted to clarify the issue I had about color at the last meeting, that it was in fact brought up with the architects on July 8th. In terms of the interior and the signage and the landscaping, I understood that this was part of an overall plan. Whether or not the funding for it went through or not, I thought we had these issues design-wise somewhat resolved. So I'm concerned about starting over on all these after the architects, you know, put together an initial overall design. From what I understood, they had a graphic designer and a landscape architect as part of their original team. So I'm concerned whether we're just throwing this out and starting over. And I thought we were looking at all custom-built display cases and furniture for the interior. When I was in there this weekend, I noticed some of the pieces of furniture were custom-built, but none of them were finished. None of the the hangings were there for the sign, for the posters or whatever, but nothing was in them, so all you saw was the black steel. I think once they're full of these images, it's going to be a different situation. But there was a mix of off-the-shelf display products, and I don't know if those came from the old visitor center or what the story was on that. So I'm just concerned that we had this total overall plan, which has kind of been thrown by the wayside, and we're, you know, piecemealing, putting this thing back together again. And this other issue that nobody's addressed is the location of these flagpoles, which was not part of the original plan that we all approved.
I think it might be a good idea if we have a committee that looks at maybe some of these changes that they're talking about, like in particular, maybe having a recommendation on the signage. And I think I'd like to go out there and view, as a person coming into town, and try and change my perspective. What I'm seeing as I'm coming in, because I as a business person and having a couple of retail stores, I feel it's very important that they have that visibility, and even something that's temporary, I think they need that visibility. I was hoping they were going to have teaser billboards on the freeway with like big question marks, what's going on, to create interest, but maybe we didn't have the money for that either. I know it's tough, and I know they need that visibility quickly, because we can't lose these people. And you as a hotelier, and we got to have every body that comes through, we got to be selling them something. So the signage is critical. And with Jim, I share this. The piecemealing thing is really tough, but I guess we just have to deal with it with the budget constraints. And I just hope that we can be a little in the loop, so that if we avoid something that's going to be hard to reverse, but something temporary, I think, to get you going and to recapture some of these people that are passing by, if it includes even resynchronizing that light, we got to look at that.
Actually, if I may say, as far as the display fixtures, the original design called for display cabinets that were not flexible. And as you know, in retail, you have to have the flexibility of moving the shelves, moving the inventory. The architectural design did not allow for that. So actually, the shelves that we have up there now were approved by the architects, and we've ordered them from a company. We're short, I believe, on some some of the fixtures that they just were back ordered. So I think that really it wasn't piecemealed. It was very well planned along with the architects and the project manager and the city. It's just that we don't have all the parts yet to get it up there. The flagpoles were from our old visitor center, and it is an eye catcher, and we really don't have a preference where they're put, as long as it, once again, as they're seen, from a distance, whether they're put back to the side, that's fine. We just would like to have them there because they are. Are the big balls still there too, the big round?
Yeah, they're in the back.
We would love to see those incorporated somehow. Now, I don't know what your feeling is on that. As far as the gate, we feel that that's really critical to helping share the history of that building. And Palm Springs Welding is the one who designed the door, and it's possible that they could go back and where the etching has been kind of rubbed off just by erosion, wear and tear, or whatever, could, redo those letters.
Let me clarify real quickly, if I might, on the flagpoles. I don't know at what stage they were located on the plans, but there is a location for the flagpoles that was on the plans that were approved as a part of the construction. And that was simply as you enter from the parking lot area, as you pass the restroom building, if you remember where that is, immediately to your right, as you would pass by the now lower perimeter wall, is the location that had been approved. So basically they would, if you were driving down south on the highway, they would be behind the building, okay, but projecting up. So that is the location that staff has been working under the assumption as an approved location. And the Rotary Club has offered to pay for the installation of those using, as Linda mentioned, the prior flagpoles. We do have to purchase the sleeves that would allow for those to be installed, and conduit was run so that they can be lit at night, which I don't believe you had at your prior location. So we're hoping we can do all of that within the $2,000 allocation that the Rotary Club has donated.
Kurt, here's a photograph of that area. Can you show roughly where the flagpoles would be?
Yeah, basically the picture that's being shown here, this is the start of the wall as you come from the parking lot area, and it would basically be, from this angle, between the wall and the building itself, okay, but to the right of the sidewalk. So just perhaps 5 feet to the south of the beginning of that wall, I guess, if that's of help. So as you walk down the sidewalk, they'd be immediately to your right.
So between the new structure and the old structure?
Well, basically, it would be inside the perimeter wall.
So it'd be south of that location, away from both buildings. So it would not be uptight and hugging.
Okay.
It'd be right off the corner, almost off the corner of the wing.
In this general
Right.
area.
Okay.
But again, there's between the
Well,
flagpoles, you have the
Well, I
sidewalk.
honestly don't recall whether that was on the plans that we saw or not, but if it was on the plans that were approved,
It may have been on the plans, but I think we spent so much time looking at the wall that some of the other details may have been.
that's why I thought we might make use of that wall now and paint it, say, visitor center.
Here,
I have a suggestion, and I want to address the issue of the placement of the plaque, but to kind of bring closure to all of this, and that is, we have several groups here in town and commissions and people, interested parties, who are very knowledgeable about these sorts of things, a lot more so, frankly, than I am. And I thought, particularly for the issue of the interior changes, perhaps landscaping, placement of the gate, benches and trash cans and so forth that might be put outside, if we could bring together a small group of people, perhaps including someone from ModCom, someone from this board, obviously someone from the city, someone from tourism, 4 or 5 people, no more than that, and try and have those people look at what's being done so that there's not a decision that's being made to do something without other people's input, or at least some historical perspective, or people who have more of a knowledge of the period of architecture. But Pete Maruzzi, I think, would be a perfect person, perhaps. And so, what do you think of that? I'm just floating that as an idea.
Let me just say, we have to remember what our responsibility here is as a board, and I think we all have an opinion about the wonderful gas station. And maybe what we saw and approved in July is not what City Council finally approved, and it's not necessarily what got built. But my feeling is here as a board, we really need to react to the issue of can the block walls be painted, because that is part of the historic building. My response would be, I'm against that. Your immediate needs are graphic needs, getting the signage up there. And, seeing the banner attached to the building right now bothers me more. I'd rather have the banner attached to the wall, the low wall. I think your idea about or the discussion I've heard about a very quick solution to paint a sign on the wall is a good one. And that could be done, I think, very quickly. Not metal signage, but just some sort of paint. Perhaps this idea of having several people from different organizations get together and solve the problems is a good one. I think that way we get a lot of input from, but I don't think it's our responsibility, this board, to approve the lighting and the signage and the furniture and the display and the landscaping, except where it affects the historic nature of the building. So that's it.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe make a suggestion. If I'm looking at priorities, I think the board does have to take a look at its role, and I think you gave us guidance on the question of what can be done on the interior. I didn't see any support for painting the block walls on the inside of the building.
Correct, no
okay.
support.
I mean, that I want to make sure that I understood that, because two, on the signage, I'm going to make a suggestion that instead of painting on the wall, we would be much better off getting a sheet of plywood, marine grade plywood, and having somebody do a temporary grand opening Palm Springs Visitor Center sign, and have it freestanding so it's not engaged with the wall, because once you paint walls, you go back to paint over it, you've got a challenge. And that way it's detached, doesn't affect the building. As Commissioner or Board Member Scott, has said, we've got something hanging on the building. An alternative to that would be to go out on the wall and put up a temporary, banner type sign. My concern is anytime it can be touched, it can be destroyed, and somebody could pick it up and move it. But to come back in and deal with it, no different than anything else, and just put up a temporary sign that everybody knows it's temporary just by how you built it. I think you'd get better visibility. You probably wouldn't have the problem of retouching the wall with paint. The other alternative would be to come in and just go to a very simple Gator foam letter. And they have standard size lettering, standard things. It might be something that a company can just glue onto the wall. And it's a temporary interim sign, and it would have a nice script feel to it. May not be perfect, but what I need, I think, from the board is guidance as to what your preferred areas would be, and then we have to do exactly what Board Member Scott said. We have to come back with proposals.
Yeah. I think that the temporary sign of just plywood and 2x4s is a great idea. The surface that's on that wall around there is very sensitive, and anything you do to it will be hard to disguise later. So I think, having a couple of these 4x8 signs would be a great quick solution, and would read as temporary, so we don't have to listen to these phone calls about what have you done to this wall. So
I think we have to drive. I personally think we need, it needs to be looked at and driven by, and the visitor centers here is the perspective of a person driving by to get the most bang for the buck, obviously. And I think in the future, one of the things that they were pursuing to get on the landscaping end, to have a partner in creating something that has a higher quality than what we were able to fund, which apparently was nothing. You might even be able to have that partnership. I foresaw that with even the signage. What if we had a major sign player in town provide the sign, if he's able to have his byline, this provided by Best Signs or whoever it happens to be. What's wrong with having a partnership on some of those? It's a commercial, it's a commercial use. That way I think we get a lot better quality in what we're doing there, as opposed to doing these piecemeal things, trying to squeeze something in that's going to look IKEA-ish than something that's really a fabulous structure. So I hate to see us not look at this, although, like, you know, Bill says about, well, you know, we're not involved in the, you know, maybe in the flagpoles and all that. The overall view of that is so important because that's what our visitors are going to see. And even though we're concerned with the historic building inside, what it's cloaked in, what it's dressed in, is as important almost as what's inside. So I think we should take a look at these various elements personally, and I'd love to look at the signage.
Right.
Thank you.
I think that's great for the final solution, but I don't know if that's necessary for this temporary resolution.
I agree 100% that, you know, the final solution needs to be very thoughtful and is going to take some time. So, you know, I think what we need to do is maybe deal with the issues, you know, one at a time. Is the board in concurrence that a temporary freestanding sign would be at least the best interim?
In the essence of time, because Linda needs something done right away, I would like to suggest that we have a subcommittee of this board and have them have a sign, temporary sign, a 4x8 sign, some ideas prepared by planning. Ideas on the changes to the interior to brighten up the colors, I think, could be also part of this process. And then maybe the benches and trash cans that you see that you might want to put outside. I think it's important that that be in keeping. Maybe focus on those 3 items, and then have that subcommittee have the authority to approve this temporary sign so it can be done hopefully in a matter of days rather than weeks and get some traffic flowing in there.
Well, aside from, I mean, the board doesn't have permit authority on signage other than, you know, location and style. That authority's in the purview of the Planning Commission. And, you know, but I think a subcommittee could talk to us about location and on a temporary sign. Would be helpful to have a subcommittee that could work quickly on some of the issues, you know, if the board wants to be involved. I still, you know, if you'd like to do that, I still think that there are 2 items that we might be able to get direction on today. One is the plaque, and the other one might be the flagpoles. But, you know, we'd like to be able to get the plaque up by the opening. And,
Well, could I get a motion that we establish a subcommittee of hopefully 2 people to at least work with Doug on location of sign, that's not part of, and that we recommend that a temporary sign be put up, knowing that it's temporary, and the same subcommittee to just sort of have some input into some of the interior changes, colors.
I will so move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? I'd like to ask Jim to be part of that subcommittee, if you would. And who else? How about the other Jim? Would you do it?
Yeah,
Yeah, because he's been on interior too, man. I'm more exterior oriented.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I would like to address the other 2 issues. Why don't we start with the plaque? Can we get a staff report on the location suggestions?
Go ahead and pass these around. Go ahead, Jane.
Basically, I met with Mike Fontana last week, I believe it was, and I'm passing around pictures now about basically an option A and an option B areas to put the plaque. Traditionally, we have placed a plaque as close to the entrance as possible. We found sort of 2 areas where we thought might be appropriate. One was directly to the left of the entrance of the to inside the center. The issue there is that the wall is actually quite uneven, so I put it on the pictures there, took a picture of it as well, and I'll pass it on actually this way. So you'd have an issue where you'd actually have the screw might be visible on one side. There might be some difficulty mounting it there. The alternate location was at the entrance, right when you come in from the parking lot, where there's an opening in the wall. It's hard to describe, I guess, on the south side of the building. There is a flat wall on the south side where, you know, there would be good visibility for visitors walking as they come in from the parking lot and they loop around towards the main entrance to the center. we thought that might be a more appropriate location. The wall is flat there. It might be a little easier to mount, so that's really the report that I have. I'm passing the pictures around, and we just like to get some direction on those two options, or if there's another place that you think might be
My-
appropriate.
option is, I'm sorry, there's a flat wall.
Right, exactly.
My feeling is that we should not attach a plaque to the fabric of the building, because those block walls are very hard to repair if we ever had to remove the plaque. I'd rather see the plaque mounted perhaps on the low wall that's coming up to the building. So just to the right of the building as you walk in, or to some object that is not, that obviously is not part of the existing building.
I have a question regarding the placing of the plaque on the outside wall. Is the wall in the interior near the building, or is it actually the outside wall from the parking lot? Will it be exposed to being completely outside the property itself, or is it an interior wall?
Which, I'm sorry.
They're all
which-
exterior.
It's all exterior.
I know they're
yeah.
exterior walls in terms of the low wall. Is it the wall that we would see coming from the parking lot in, or is it a wall inside that?
The low wall?
You said the low
You
wall
mean
about
board
placing
member
the plaque?
Scott's suggestion?
Yes.
Or,
So it's where this curve,
So it is on the
outside curved
exterior wall.
And it
Okay.
curves around, and then it used to be where the gate was,
Okay.
right down low there. I think, I'm visualizing, I walked there last weekend, but
I'm just-
is it about 2 feet high?
You're talking about right,
Where the wall curved, the existing outside wall
Uh-huh.
curves around the stucco wall, and it curves and
It's about-
stops?
28 to 30 inches high in that location.
So people would have to lean down to read the plaque.
I'll go get it. No, I'll get it, yeah. But I'll get the plaque so you can look at it.
The plaque was made a long time ago. Right.
Jane, could you explain where we have it at City Hall on the outside of the building, on the building?
Right, this is basically exactly the same plaque or the same size that we have outside of the council chamber. I believe it's on the right-hand side, just outside the door. And what we were looking at in terms of placement of this is, Doug had spoken about, the way that plaque was placed, I guess in some relation to the existing block pattern. And, I think that's what, when we talked with Mike, that's what we were trying to achieve in this instance as well.
What's going to be mounted on the new structure? There's a glass partition that has some holes in it. What's going to be mounted on that?
There is to be stainless steel lettering that says Palm Springs Visitor Center, just in a horizontal line at that point. They're
Mhm.
working through some design issues with the manufacturer, another item that,
But that's in the budget.
that's
That's
in the budget and included in the original.
So
Well,
you
it-
have a font that you're working with already on the building?
I'm not sure what specific font. It is a block-type lettering similar to what you would have here at City Hall.
Okay.
And
Well, because to back up for the signage, if we've already got one type of lettering being applied to the structure, I would imagine it should be consistent
Right.
to the signage we put in the front.
Why don't you just hire somebody to stand there and hold it?
Because it's heavy and it hurts. Yeah, these are,
It seems to me that we've mounted a lot of plaques on the walls of a lot of buildings, and I personally don't have an issue with mounting it as long as it's not a horribly intrusive mount. I'm thinking, what, 4 holes or something you put it in?
Yeah.
But, I'm up to the board's feeling about that,
Yeah.
because there is one mounted here on City
Right, it's
Hall,
ju-
and they've
well,
mounted.
it's just because I wasn't around when it was mounted. The problem is, once you drill into that block, you can never repair it to match the existing. So that's assuming that someday you want to take the sign down or move it or whatever. So I just would prefer that any signage on any building, historic building, not be attached to the fabric of the building.
Is there any way to attach it without drilling the block? with the weight of that sign, I would guess not.
No.
Velcro.
You know, the way they're set up to be bolted and cemented, you know, to the bolts. It's a very stable, very clean installation because you can't see any of the mounting. And it actually fits quite nice relative to the block arrangement as far as how it sets up. The issue of doing it in another location, you know, the architect's idea was to create a little separate monument. Their idea was also, you know, fairly low, so you would have to look down at it. And when staff looks at locations and when Jing and Gabriel and Mike Fontana went out, I think their objective was to put it in a place where almost everybody would see it, and there's almost a perfect little alcove that's out of flow of traffic, yet almost within arm's length of where you're going to walk. So people could step aside and take a look at it in that area. But it's really the board's purview. You know, we'd like to have it mounted, you know, by the opening date. And if the committee would like to look at locations, we'll certainly work with the committee to do that. But during the holidays, I mean, we're going to have to decide fairly quickly where it's going to be, or we'll find the plaque will still be in our offices on grand opening. And, you know, I won't take it to the site unattached. I just don't want to lose one.
I had a question about that. Since we're using this Palm Springs Welding Company, or is that the name? I'm sorry. We're having a steel company doing some other fabrication. Could they perhaps have the sign, the plaque in that type of location, but on a drill into the concrete and have like an iron frame and have that up against the wall and not disturb the actual drilling into the wall since it is an unpainted surface, or is that not realistic?
I mean, clearly you could do a ground-mounted frame, you know, that's attached to the concrete. I mean, that can be done. We'd have to go back in and see if Kurt has some money in the budget to do that. I mean, typically the city staff mounts all the plaques. You know, we've mounted every plaque in town, even on private property, that at least the plaques that are standing in a visible location.
Well, perhaps that steel company. Perhaps the steel company or the welding company might be willing to help with something like that in order to have that, and they could have a little play on that, perhaps. I was thinking.
I was just making the reference that they were the ones who did the door.
I see.
Yeah.
The original door. Yeah, they're a subcontractor. Obviously, the city can always go back and ask for donations. You know, if you mount it away from the wall, you know, then you do add something that adds, you know, attention that's not really the building, you know, so you'd end up with a frame below. And the question for the board is, you know, what's the most appropriate location? If the board's not comfortable with looking at it today, you know, we certainly could, if you would delegate that to the subcommittee, that would be very helpful.
Well, as I said, I don't have any, I like the secondary location myself on the building, but I'll leave it up to the board. Do I have a motion that the board wants to delegate this to the subcommittee, or that the board wants to mount it in one of the two suggested locations?
Let me just add one more comment. When we went to go see the Oasis Tower, their plaque is mounted in the ground. It's flat down, like one of the Walk of the Stars thing. And it's quite, you don't realize it until they tell you that, but once it's there, it's very, you can read it. You don't have to.
You never see it. I've walked by it 1,000 times and never seen it. Incidentally, they moved it themselves. Just so you know that. Do I hear a motion?
Well, I don't know. I'm actually very conflicted about it. We have a history of mounting them to the structures. I think the visibility of this is really important, and as much as I am worried, I would be concerned about ever moving it, I don't foresee it ever being moved. I see it becoming part of the structure. So
Well, before we take, can I make the suggestion that since you're going to be on the subcommittee, that maybe we leave it up to the subcommittee to go up and at least look and see if mounting it to the low wall would be appropriate?
Okay.
And then otherwise, we'll just leave it up to you.
Would you turn that suggestion into a
So
motion?
I make a motion that the decision about the location of the plaque be left up to the subcommittee.
Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions, thank you.
Which means you can, right.
Second issue is the
If I could,
flagpole.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
I'd just like to ask one point of clarification. Jing and I I'd asked Jing an item relative to the plaque. There was some concern expressed in that the plaque, when the verbiage was put in place, was when it was designated as a historic building, and there's nothing that indicates the current use of the building for the visitor center. And so I'm just asking for inquiry. Is it appropriate in a case like that, that a complimentary plaque would be added below it that indicates its now current use as the permanent visitor center, or is that something that is not really in keeping with historic plaque designations?
My own feeling is that you either use one plaque, and you either use this one or you design a new one. And I'm personally comfortable with the one that we have, because I think the major redesign of the building is when it was, and it also notes the fact that Albert Frey himself was involved in the redesign when it became an art gallery, which makes that redesign more significant than what we've done in the last 6 months.
Historically, the board has recognized the historic status of the building and original design, and has not really addressed subsequent owners. And under another agenda item relative to historic plaque survey update, I'm going to address that as to why one plaque is not mounted. And, you know, from a private property owner standpoint, some private property owners would prefer that they be acknowledged that they're involved in the property. And it might get plaques up on buildings, but that's a little bit different issue from this. But historically, the board's been pretty firm on very simple statements as the historic status of the building.
Does that answer your question? In a roundabout way, I hope. Okay, can we have a brief update on the flagpole, so if we can make a decision on that?
Can I make a suggestion that we leave the decision about the flagpoles up to the subcommittee? I mean, if it's really something where you have to go up and look at the site.
Yeah.
Would you like to turn that into a
I'd like to
motion?
move that we leave the decision about the location of the flagpoles to the subcommittee.
Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, there's your answer on the flag. Okay. Should we order lunch now? No. Any other discussion about the Tramway Visitor Center? I encourage the subcommittee to be involved in the discussion about what is being done in the interior, even though that is not something that we really have purview over. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all's interest.
Let's get some more people coming in there. So it was busy when I was there the other day. So.
Good.
Yeah.
Kurt?
Good. Our next agenda item, which I wanted to add, was the Community Church Historic Site update from planning, if there is any update, and also the church across the street, which I think is part of the whole project, but is not designated.
Yes, the original community church is a Class 1 site. That property will be owned by Westman Development Company. Their longer-term plan is to convert that into a bed and breakfast, maintain the historic character of it, and they've got somebody that is a specialist in remodeling old buildings in town, as well as a hotel operator looking at it. So they're evaluating that. They don't have any plans to do anything right now. They're really focused on I believe it's a 38-unit condominium project on the more contemporary community church site. That would involve the demolition of the church and the 2 residential structures on the property. That project was approved by the Planning Commission and will go to the City Council on December 17th. As part of that project, they're proposing bay parking on Cahuilla. The bay parking would be available for the church slash bed and breakfast in the future, so it's not being allocated to the condominium development. It's going to be built with the condominium project, but reserved for the use across the street, which I think starts to deal with that long-term economic viability of the church, and that is a bed and breakfast without any parking is a challenge, and Mr. Westman felt that he had to deal with the parking on the adjoining property. So that's an update. I'll certainly try to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you. I'm sure you'll bring that to us when there are firm plans for the historic site. Item number 3, Mills Act clarification of program requirements. I'm assuming that's something that was added by planning.
Right. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this was brought to our attention by Mr. Vince Perosi. He's the owner of the Carrie Perosi House, and he's our most recent property to enter into a Mills Act agreement. When he received his tax bill this year, his property tax had not decreased as he was expecting. It actually went up. And so we did a little bit more research into it, and we'd like to make it clear, because this is one of the city's, prime financial incentives for historic property owners, that it is not a guarantee that there will be a reduction in property taxes, that it is a potential reduction. And really, we start to see the break where if you have properties that were sold after 1990, those are the properties that really have the potential to have that property tax reduction. But in cases like Mr. Perosi's, where he purchased a house a very long time ago, prior to 1978, those properties have a lesser chance of seeing a property tax reduction. In many cases, none at all. So it's something that I thought that the board should know. I understand, you're out in the community speaking with property owners, and I know I've had property owners approach me, and, that we want to make that clarification.
Mr. Chairman,
Is
if I
that
could
based
just-
on Proposition 13 and his property value was? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're a pre-Prop 13 property, which means their property tax was frozen in the 1978 timeframe, which means they don't pay what the property is valued at. And I think in looking at the letter from the county tax assessor, they looked at 3 different methodologies to calculate the property tax to see which would be most beneficial. None of them resulted in a property tax reduction. So the Perosis are a bit disappointed, since they went through a process and put a lot of energy into this. Without being tax accountants, it would have been difficult to understand what the implications are, and it took the county tax assessor a while, to basically respond to the Perosis on how and why. I think the Perosis have made a request that the agreement be rescinded, that they didn't see a need to be involved in a Mills Act agreement and have that recorded against their property if there wasn't a financial incentive. And I think, from staff's perspective, we don't certainly disagree with them. That was their prime motivation. It's still a Class 1 site. The Mills Act agreement only requires that the property be maintained and that the plaque be visible from the public. In this case, the plaque would have to be relocated because it's a little bit far back on the property where they found the best rock to put it on because the house is so far back from the property. So if the board, is an acknowledgement of the dilemma that the Perosis are in and the reality that this is probably going to be an unusual circumstance that somebody that's owned a property this long is going to ask for a Mills Act. We will just be very cautious as we talk to people about Mills Act and find out when they purchase property. Encourage them to contact the county tax assessor in advance or their tax advisor to determine if, in fact, they'll get an economic advantage. If the board doesn't object, what we'll do is work through the process to rescind the agreement and comply with their request. They've been great supporters of historic preservation. We certainly, from staff's perspective, would hate that they have any ill feelings that they're in an agreement that doesn't work for them.
Just for clarification, does a Mills Act, does that trigger a reassessment of the property?
It triggers a reevaluation of how the property tax is handled, and at best, it can result in a fairly sizable reduction in the property tax bill.
So in this case, they didn't actually pay any more than they would have paid had they not,
Yeah,
they
I
got
don't,
their same tax bill, in other words.
I think what they're saying is they got essentially the same type of tax bill they would get, and because of the pre-Prop 13 situation, they already have about as large a credit as the county could give them.
Do we need a motion to?
It's not really an action item for you if the board just understands that we'll work with them to work out of the agreement. We'll just proceed with that, and I haven't looked at the agreement to see what the out provisions are. It probably takes mutual agreement of both parties or a certain notice period.
No problem.
Unless the board has, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Agenda item number 4, thank you for the update, Doug. Remodel renovation of 3133 Sunnyview Drive update.
I'll have to excuse myself. I'm one of the neighbors and own one of the steel houses.
Right, I'd actually put this on the agenda at the request of Board Member Isman at the last meeting, and I have tried to contact the property owner, but it turns out that the contact person we had for the previous remodel, they were the owner's representative. So I don't actually have the actual property owner's name, and but the last communication we had with them, we sent a memo to them, indicating that, we understood that they were working towards rebuilding the wall back to its original appearance, and they had agreed to that, that they were going to do that. I haven't been up there recently to see whether that's been done. From my understanding, I don't think it has.
Is the issue is that the wall was torn down, as I understand,
That's
so that
correct, right.
some equipment could come through to put in something, and then it was not rebuilt to the original, and the wall is part of the designation? And
It is part of the designation, yes.
Okay. But they initially agreed to rebuild it, but they have not done so yet.
That's right.
Well, can I ask that we get an update on that at the next meeting and
Sure.
see if that has happened?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Like, go get Jim.
The next agenda item is the Media Outreach Subcommittee update, Board Member Rush. There was a meeting last Thursday, which unfortunately at the last minute was not able to get to because of the crisis at the hotel. But I know, Jing, you were there, so since Board Member Rush is not here, maybe you can give us an update.
Sure. Well, basically, this was a follow-up to a meeting that Kathy and I believe Doug may have been there, had with Rick and Omar a few months back about the discussions about an HSPB media outreach program. And this follow-up meeting was essentially just to clarify what some of those program requirements might be. And what we sort of broke it down into was sort of a phase 1 and a phase 2 process. Right now, immediately, we felt together at the meeting, it was me, Chev, and Lee Hoosfeld and Rick with Channel 17 to talk about sort of a photography program to start with initially just Class 1 sites, just to limit the amount of photographs that we have, numbered probably to about 80 or 77 to 80 photographs that we would have Omar take pictures of. He's graciously, more or less given us a discounted rate on his time, but the board will, most likely pick up the cost of the film. And Channel 17 will also, donate the video editing and that type of thing later on. But that's really a phase 1 program. We talked about putting maybe a very short description or the designation number or the name of the property, as it scrolls by on the TV screen or something like that. But those are details that have yet to be worked out. But initially, at least, we could all agree that we'll start with just this initial phase of photographs. We're probably looking at the starting of photography probably not until January of 2004. My task right now is just to write a letter of introduction to each of these Class 1 property owners to let them know, and if they have any objections to being have their property photographed. It would be entirely from the right of way, of course. We're not going to intrude onto private property. And I'd like to get that out this month, so we at least have a good 30 days for people to respond with any concerns. And the good news is, most people are hopefully in town now, so we hope to get a good response from that. With a Phase 2 part of the program, we're looking at contacting prominent community members. We have some architects of historic buildings that are still alive, who might be willing to talk about their projects and sort of have that as an overlay over these pictures, have interviews, something like that. So, but that's something that, will certainly be something down the line. Be quite an effort to put that together. So, in terms of print media, we spoke with Lee about various options with regards to, media beyond sort of the traditional outlets such as the Desert Sun or something. She gave us a suggestion, something called the Coachella Valley Community Report, Channel 10, in terms of television coverage, and in terms of maybe putting the architectural guide even on our website, put it into a PDF file available for download. I know it's sold now, maybe that might be a way to make that work out. Let's see, and to put the photos also that Omar ends up taking, maybe put them on the website as well. So that's sort of just an update, the types of things we were discussing. But really, the first thing we're going to get started on is this photographs of the Class 1 sites.
Great.
And did you talk at the subcommittee level about funding for that?
Right. We discussed that would maybe come out of the HSPB budget, if that was appropriate.
It would be basically a fairly small agreement relative to Omar services, and very reasonable hourly rate, and he does outstanding work, and between Omar and Rick, I think they could put something together that would be a great graphic image. And then if, over time we could layer in an audio track, you could do something that would be very special if we could pick that up fairly quickly with some of the people in the community that can talk about the buildings. We do have a little bit of money in the HSPB budget. The majority of the budget is committed to the survey. We've been able to save some money up over the years on plaques, and basically you'd be taking money that could go to plaques in the future and do something with media, recognizing that right now we don't have a tremendous number of plaques that we need to acquire. I'll give you an update on that under item number 6, but I think there's sufficient funds. In your next item with regards, the item number 8, we will talk about some additional cost relative to the survey. So we don't have an unlimited amount of money, but we might be able to accomplish this one if you're comfortable with that. And we've gone down the line assuming that you would be comfortable.
I am. It doesn't sound like Omar's going to charge a huge amount of money. We did discuss about the survey and trying to get some press about the survey when it's eventually published and goes to City Council. Was that discussed at the meeting?
It was actually, Lee had brought up the point that, we should maybe try and package together sort of, a bunch of things about the activities of the board in conjunction with some event or something like that. And we thought maybe at the conclusion of the survey, that might be an appropriate time to sort of bring all these things together to make a coordinated program as opposed to, as they happen, sort of piecemeal press releases. So, we did discuss that, and, we'll be looking at trying to maybe coordinate that with the timing of the end of the survey.
Thanks. That sounds great.
Great.
And probably the most current PR opportunity, obviously, will be the grand opening of the Visitor Center. And we'll try very hard to make sure that in the press releases we put in a little bit of the history of the property, so that will probably get pretty good coverage when they actually do it January 6th.
Agenda item number 6, Historic Site Plaque Survey Update. Board Member Rush, who is not here, but you have some information, Doug, that you wanted to
Well, I'll let Jane give a
Jane?
start.
Okay.
I discussed it briefly with Board Member Rush last time he was at the meeting, and basically to give an update regarding the O'Donnell House and the Willows. We are working together with Tracy Conrad on the wording for that plaque, so that will be ordered. The fire station plaque needs to be ordered as well. The Oasis Tower, I guess, as you found out, is now on the ground, so that
Right.
one that previously was not visible. The Miller House, we have the plaque, however, Catherine Mailer would like to finish. She indicated her improvements before that gets put on, so we've been working with her on that.
Ingleside Inn?
Ingle,
I'll give you that update. We did prepare a plaque that represented the historic context of the Ingleside Inn. That plaque was picked up by the owner of the Ingleside Inn, and after review and careful consideration, the plaque was returned. I was unaware of that. It was returned to a different city office than planning, and so far a search of nooks and crannies has failed to we've been unable to find the plaque. The current owner was concerned that the plaque only talked about the original development of the property, did not talk about the long history that the property's had, and the fact it's had long-term ownership and steward of the property, and the current owner just felt it was not appropriately worded and chose not to have it installed at the property and return the plaque. I think it comes up with the issue of, how far do we go in a plaque relative to describing events and activities. Looking at the Tramway gas station, I hadn't read it for quite a while, and it does recognize a more contemporary effort as opposed to just the original construction activity. I think when this plaque was done, it was intended to give some acknowledgement to the current property owners at that time and the effort that they put in. I think the owners of the Ingleside Inn would be interested in having a plaque if it were worded with a little bit more language relative to the long-term history that the current management, we might not have to put names in, but at least recognize how the property's been used for the last number of years, and the property owner reminded me that they have been involved in the property longer than the original people and the people that constructed it, so historically they've had a longer duration of involvement with the property. I think they surpass the involvement this year, is the way it was described to me. So it really is going to be a matter of redoing a plaque, working with the current property owner, and if the board's willing to work in that direction, we'd certainly contact the property owner and try to further that. It's a little disappointing that we did a plaque that was unacceptable, and I don't have history as to whether or not the current owner looked at the wording before it was created or not.
Well, my personal feeling is that for plaques like that, you need to take them on a case-by-case basis. And I think, for instance, in the Tramway gas station plaque, the mention is really about the fact that Albert Frey was consulted in the redesign, and I certainly think that is appropriate language on a plaque. In terms of, I'm assuming Mr. Haber is the one you're working with, I think his involvement in the property, or the period of his ownership, maybe not his name specifically, in my opinion, that's significant to the history of the building. To say that the house was purchased in 2002 by Joe and Jenny something on a new house that they bought, I think is not appropriate. So I'd like to give staff direction to work with Mr. Haber and develop a new plaque, assuming the board agrees with that.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
If someone wants to change a plaque that's already been created, would they be willing to pay for the modifications if it pleased them, so we wouldn't be expending our budget if they weren't happy with it? I know it's kind of getting into the co-opt area that I'm so interested in, but perhaps that they wouldn't mind paying for it if it was something that we were willing to make a change to.
Well, first, if the board's willing to work with the current property owner on language, that opens the door for a dialogue. And then the question of the fact that the city's already prepared a plaque, and then whether or not there could be an agreement on the new plaque, we can certainly talk to the owner about it. We do have funds And the board may just have to come back and say, you know, from a policy standpoint, it would prefer to have it plaqued. I didn't approach that with Mr. Haber because I needed to make sure that we could get wording first that might be more suitable. And, you know, if you all know Mr. Haber and the great storyteller he is, you know, he has certainly carried the folklore of that building for an awfully long time and really worked hard at it. So I think that's where he came from. And it's a labor of love for him. It's not just a business that he operates at an arm's length. But if the board's comfortable with some wording, I'll go back and sit down with Mr. Haber. We'll see if we can come up with some wording and talk about the funding of it.
Yeah, we'd like to review the wording before it's done.
We will
So-
always bring the wording back, you know, we for spell check and other reasons. They're real heavy to lift into the trash can because there's not much use once you receive them.
Well, I'm in favor of rewording it. I think it's to our benefit to have it plaqued rather than not. And I think a lot of these things have been resolved. In recent years, the owners have been involved in the language on the plaque, so there's not this disconnect any longer.
Good. All right, so we're at this point going to work specifically on Willows, O'Donnell, and the fire station, and then we'll come back, you know, obviously with hopefully some wording on the Ingleside Inn. My suggestion is on the Oasis Tower until the renovation of the building occurs. Let's just leave the plaque where it is.
Has the Kaufman House plaque been addressed?
As far as a new one?
Well,
Or-
as far as there not being a visible one?
No, we haven't contacted them yet. You know, but we will. And we're hopeful that the fact that we have a new design of plaque, that it might be one that they'd be more comfortable with having publicly displayed. I think that was a key issue.
And I'd like to encourage maybe as part of the change in the Mills Act status on the Carrie Perosi House, they'd be willing to move that plaque to a more visible place.
I think they would be willing to do it, provided the city, you know, moved it. We just have to go out and find a better location for it. So that's something we'll follow up on.
Agenda item number 7, 2004-2005 work program additions for council review. In our packet, we received a copy of the work program. Are there changes from what it was before? I didn't quite know.
We had briefed the board on this at your last meeting, and the board asked to take another look at it. If you take a look at the items that are in your work program, I think that most all of the items that we're currently active in are listed, and the board's pleasure as to things that you would like to add. You know, we're certainly at the point where we should start discussing anything to be added or modified in the work program. I can tell you that with all of the other things that the staff is doing, if we could complete most of this, it would be a pretty ambitious effort. You know, and the outreach relative to trying to get, you know, sites will hinge right off of the survey. So we, you know, might want to take a look at whether or not you want to refine the local, state, national historic designation, or just leave it as that. I mean, the board we could add in the fact that you have, you know, your subcommittees, and that you're actively out there trying to work on designations. But it's really up to the board's pleasure relative to what you need. Key issue early in the process is if you see anything that needs funding, to start that into the hopper real quickly. So that as we start the preliminary budget, which will probably start immediately after the turn of the year, we can take a look at that. And obviously, we all know state budget is going to affect local budgets, so it's going to be a tough year.
Any comments on the work program?
Just, I heard the recent city council meeting on TV, and there was some discussion about how they might ask the various commissions to come up with vision statements and purposes and so forth. Is that what our work program is? I mean, have they been given copies of, have the new council members been given copies of our present work program?
Yes.
Thank you.
But it's in a stack of things about that high. I mean, that's the shock value of the difference. The volume of information that council members gets, nobody understands it until you get the packets over a couple of weeks. It's a tremendous volume of information. So, that information is available to the council. We'll probably be putting together some summary reports at the request of the city manager. Council will have a little bit of a workshop this Wednesday where they'll start talking to each other about priorities and programs and things of that nature.
Agenda item number 8, Historic Site Survey Process, Contacts and Consultants Report. I see that we have the second, are there 100 names on the second list that we were given? I didn't count them, but. Didn't look like 100.
Right. Basically, thank you. Basically, this list of second 100 is not really 100. It's about 54 sites, and I'll explain basically what happened there. They've already started on these 54, but the issue they ran into, and it's something we've known from the beginning, is with regards to obscured properties and properties that were added after they finished a reconnaissance survey that they may not have been able to get to or see. So I think what we passed out today also was a list of obscured properties. It's about a list of, I believe, 36 in that list that was sent over by the consultant. And what they wanted to do was, maybe to make a second trip down here to take a look at that. And we're going to work with them on, just putting together a very focused, maybe potentially a second trip down here to take a look at properties they didn't get to see the first time that will actually bring that number up to 100 as the contract requires. So and what they requested really was if the board could take a look at that obscured list. Some of these, I've actually taken out the property owner's phone numbers, but we do have some contact information for. But if you see one that you certainly know that you have contact or the property owner or something like that, we'd be glad to know it. So we can, very quickly, find properties that maybe we can't access or ones that we can.
The key issue relative to this, and I think Mr. Lee is going to. Okay, we're going to be off air. The tape will run out in 5 minutes. Question is, Mr. Chairman, would you like to go off the air or continue on? I think Mr. Lee has the ability to continue. You'd have to change the tapes.
Well, I think we're winding down, so I'd like to continue on the air if we could.
Okay. Well, if Mr. Lee has a concern about that, I'm sure we'll get another note.
Okay.
If Mr. Lee needs a break to switch tapes, he can let us know and we could take a brief break.
If I may comment, well, first of all, I made a list of the buildings or the structures that were missing, either from my suggestions or from the ModCom suggestions, and some of them are on this list of the obscured properties. But one of the buildings on the obscured properties list is a Class 1 historic site, so that can be removed. The one at 290 Sims.
Okay. I think that was maybe an addition or something, but we'll take that off.
This list that you passed out is actually on the obscured property?
A number of them are, not all of them. The Royal Hawaiian is on this list. The Elrod House is on this list. The Seven Lakes condominium complex is on this list.
555 East San Lorenzo, is that certainly known as the Triangle Inn?
Yes.
That's on this list.
Are these properties that we gave to the consultants when they were here on your list?
When the board put together their list of 25 structures for their top 25, those 3 were on my list, and the ModCom at the same time had submitted a list of structures, and these were the only ones from their submitted list that didn't make it on here yet. So I just wanted to bring them to our attention, because a number of them, I think, are more significant than, say, the Greyhound station and that car showroom on Indian, which is in not the best of shape.
So,
Ms.
Where do we go from here?
Mr. Chairman, there's really, we're going to need some direction from the board. If you would like the consultants to return to Palm Springs to look at obscured properties, we have two issues to deal with. First and foremost, we need to get them access. And the second one is a contract amendment that would be, in the $5,000 to $8,000 range. The only source of funds for that would be to take monies away from the plaque program, which you probably could do and still cover the plaques that we've talked about. I'd have to do a double check, but we certainly wouldn't want to give up plaques for the other one unless the board, made that trade-off. But staff certainly wouldn't make the trade-off since the money was appropriated specifically for plaques. The other option would be to have a future work program, and basically come out of this survey with a future work program that says in the future the city needs to try and survey these properties. I think then the other direction would be is if we're not going to try to get all the obscured properties, it would be to give the consultant the direction to take a look at the list of 200 properties and or the list of properties that were nominated or suggested by other members of the community, and basically make up the 100 out of that list. The question would be, in a prioritization standpoint, would they really be the highest priority, properties in the community to move forward? But we certainly, under the contract, could ask the consultant, you have to give us a list of 100, work off of the existing list and information and give us a list of 100. And I'm sure they would do that. Unless we can get actual access to a number of these properties, I'm not sure, and we'd have to have the access guaranteed in advance. It's going to be productive to get bring the consultants down to, survey what they can get to. I'd hate to have them come down thinking they could survey 30 properties and go home with 5. It'd be a wonderful trip to Palm Springs for them. Certainly better weather this time. It might be a reward for the work they did in the middle of summer, but it's certainly not probably the best use of our resources. I can tell you that if you defer, it to a future work program, it would be one that either the board would have to take on or we'd have to allocate some funds in the future. And anytime you defer something that needs funds, you get back into the issue of when might the monies be appropriated. I wouldn't expect monies being appropriated in next year's budget.
I would be in favor of spending the plaque money to bring them back down to look at the obscured buildings, and if the obscured buildings don't complete the list, I would go to Plan B, that the 200 be completed from the suggested lists. I don't want to lose the opportunity to have 200 properties on this survey.
Jim, can I be reminded of what we're going to use this for again, just because I was thinking my head's in the tramway gas station. Can you, what do you see this as?
Well, it's first of all, it's going to be a permanent list of possibly significant structures, so that these buildings will not be altered or demolished without due consideration. And it's inventory for future Class 1 historic sites as well.
We don't have that without having the consultant view the properties.
Well, I don't think they feel comfortable listing these without having seen them.
I see.
Yeah, if somebody could get access to the properties and photograph them, my recollection, Jing, is the consultant would be comfortable with that, but they need to have a visual documentation of the property to be able to make a determination. They prefer to be on site, but my recollection is they indicated they could work off of of photographs.
Right, and the suggestion that they made was, you know, the reason they really tried to give us a focus list of this 36 is that, you know, there are 7 board members, perhaps if someone would be willing to even take on, you know, 1 or 2 of these properties, if you know, some of these were suggested by HSPV, you know, board members. You know, if you know someone or you know the property owner, you're able to access the property, able to perhaps photograph it, you know, they were comfortable with, you know, someone documenting the property on their behalf. So
Wow.
that was one suggestion.
And a number of these were just ones they didn't get to. Some of these
Some
are
of them
not
they didn't get
obscured.
to, right,
Right.
So
exactly.
Jimbo, is this something that we couldn't approach on, like, I hate to say this again because we just did this, but have a subcommittee to actually approach these property owners, and maybe they'd be less
Yeah.
intimidated or more likely to have their properties reviewed if they were approached by like 2 people to maybe photograph it, and that way it could be done in our free time as opposed to engaging the consultants in it if they can work off photographs that could be taken at those locations, or is that just not?
I mean, I think that could be done. I think it would be a lot more efficient to have them come down for a day or 2 and have members of our board take turns driving them to these that they personally can access. So I think it would be a lot more efficient, personally, and I think they would be more comfortable as well. I mean, because a number of these are already documented in a number of books on Palm Springs, and that wasn't, you know, enough.
Based on just a quick review on the list that you provided here, that I only see 2 that are on the list that's either
There's
obscure.
3 on that list.
What's the other one? I've got Seven Lakes, the Royal
7 Lakes, the
Hawaiians.
Royal Hawaiian, and the Elrod House isn't on there.
No, it isn't.
No.
There's a couple on on Southridge
Right,
Drive.
right.
But, so perhaps if they did come back down, if there were properties that were not accessible for whatever reason, they could be filled in with these properties. So we come up with enough to make the 200.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right.
So I tend to agree with you, Jim, that we try and set a budget. It seems like $5,000 is a fair budget to have them come back down and do what we can to, and even if they come down and they can't get into properties because we can't get access, then even after the fact, we could continue to work to try and get a photograph and send them a photograph.
Yeah, I don't see
what-
why we
yeah.
can't do both.
I mean, what we'll do is, you know, this second trip down will be very focused. They will have a list of properties to actually go to that we know for sure they can get into. So we're not going to run into, oh, you know, we might have to make a 3rd trip because we missed,
Right.
you know,
Right.
these properties on the list. It's going to be a very focused program to finish up, you know, this last, you know, 100 properties, so.
And I'd be personally happy to volunteer a day or a half a day, whatever they want, to
Okay.
lead them to the properties I can get them into.
Do I hear a motion that we contact the consultants and suggest a second trip down to go through the obscure properties and the properties that weren't surveyed, and include in that those that you have given us a list of, as a possible fill-in for those that they can't get to see, but with a maximum cap of a $5,000 expense? That's what I'd like to see. Maybe I'm just, okay.
Could I make a suggestion?
What's that?
Don't mention the funds.
Don't
Let
mention
us-
the funds,
Let us
okay.
negotiate. If they know what the budget is, I guarantee you that's the best we'll get.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would second the motion that they come down and view what they can and complete the second 100 list from that visit and from the submitted list.
Okay.
They can stay in my guest room, I mean, that's the, you know.
If somebody has a facility that they could stay in and that was something they'd be comfortable with, that certainly could be a way to reduce. The lodging accommodations is not a significant amount of the money
No.
to come down. It's the fact that you've got them for, you know, a minimum of about 3 full days.
Right.
And,
Flavor.
yeah, that's the real cost.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And do we want to set up a subcommittee to try and get access? Bill, you know everybody in town, maybe you could.
No, but I do have, for a number of these houses, I know how to get access to them, so I could provide names of contacts and phone numbers for some people. If there's one person that we want, whether it's Jing or Jim mentioned he'd be taking the people around, so someone.
Well, I think if we could get the contacts, what we need to do is either have it part of the consultant's task to make contacts. You know, what we want them to do is be able to come down and have a successful survey. And in advance, we have to know that we can get access. Otherwise, you know, it could be very difficult, you know, to be successful. And that's something that Jing and the consultant will talk about, and if we need a board member to help, it certainly would help us.
So we'll give the contacts to Jing.
Mhm.
I was going to say, why don't we all, as board members, if we have duplication, that's okay, go through this list, and if we have contact name, phone number information, just provide it to Jing, and it might be helpful. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a meeting off-site that I have to go to, so I'm going to have to excuse myself.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us, Doug. Agenda item number 9, discussion of city's historic preservation ordinance. That's an ongoing agenda item. Is there any discussion today?
No.
Number 10, Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, Board Member Scott. Can you give
Yes.
us a quick update?
We had an event on November 15th, Spanish Colonial Revival. It was well-attended, and we saw a lot of very interesting buildings in the Palm Springs area. We put together a really wonderful journal, which is a book with photographs, and I'm going to give some, Jing, to you to forward on to the, because they are pictures of some of the buildings that we're listing in the survey here. And I've also given a copy to all the members of the board. And that's my report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Palm Springs Historical Foundation, Board Member
Nothing really
Bledsoe?
to update that the Village Green is open, and the suggestion that they do have a lot of available holiday gifts, videos and books, if anyone is interested in going down there and purchasing those. Thank you.
Thanks. From the Palm Springs Modern Committee, the 2004 ModCom Design Awards will be presented on February 14th during the annual Palm Springs Modernism Weekend. Awards will be presented to 4 residential properties, 1 single family, 1 multiple family, 1 individual condominium, and 1 apartment building or condominium development. Nominations must be received by December 31st, 2003. Members and non-members are welcome to nominate properties. If you would like to nominate, nominations or questions should be sent to the Education Committee Chairman at mrimber@aol.com or phone 318-6118. And the ModComs will be meeting this Saturday at Modern Way. So that's the update from the Modern Committee. Number 12, Palm Springs. Number 13, Architecture and Design Council, Palm Springs Museum. Jim, is there an update?
The Architecture and Design Council's first lecture series date is this Saturday, December 13th. The artist Andrea Zittel will be showing slides and talking about her work at 6 p.m. on Saturday in the Museum Theater. It's free for Architectural and Design Council members, and I think it's $5 for the general public. It should be a great lecture and event, and I encourage anybody interested to attend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zittel.
Any other discussion or board and staff reports?
Nope.
What is the date of our next meeting? Does anyone know?
It's late January.
Oh, it's the second Tuesday. I think it's the 13th, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. I will be out of town for the next meeting, just so you know. And
Chev will be running.
Chev will be running our next meeting. So any questions or comments or agenda additions? And Loretta, please contact him as well before that. I'll be in touch before then. Meeting is adjourned.